Well, welcome back to Live at FDIC, brought to you by Firehouse Subs, the firefighter-founded hot sub chain with a passion for hearty and flavorful food, heartfelt service, and public safety. Ready for your next mission? Firehouse Subs is offering firefighters the opportunity to continue serving after service now as restaurant owners. Learn more at www.firehousesubsfranchising.com. My name is Chris McLoone. I will be your host for this segment of Live at FDIC. And with me to talk about moving water delivery is Andy Soccodato, as always. That's kind of our go-to guy. We actually usually have someone else here. Bill Adkins was in town. He did his class, but unfortunately he is under the weather today. So hopefully he gets back in service real soon and his ride back home isn't too bad. We've got a bunch of things to talk about. A little bit about your class, a little bit about what we've both seen at the show this week when it comes to water delivery, and what maybe people should be taking a look at. But to get us started, why don't you just briefly describe the class that you presented, and then just talk a little bit about what you talked about, and maybe if anyone had a challenging question, let's talk about that.
Yeah, absolutely. It's an honor to be here. Thank you for having me. And it's great to be back at FDIC. So the class that I presented this year was Advanced Drafting Operations, Getting Greedy with Your Water in the Rural Environment. And really, it's a class that kind of takes a deep dive into how to maximize your water when drafting from a static body. Stuff that we talked about, we went into methods for maximizing your flow from a draft. We talked about alternative drafting methods that don't require a primer for those scenarios where those fail. Mm-hmm. And then we talked about how to deal with a lot of challenging water supply issues that you'll typically find in the rural environment. Personally, it's why I love teaching drafting stuff and teaching rural water stuff, because it's one of those topics where you have to overcome lots of challenges, mm-hmm. right? I joke around and say that the urban cities, they typically have it fairly easy because mm-hmm. we have a hydrant, every couple hundred feet or whatever the spacing may be. And even if I don't know what I'm doing, I know that I can at least hook one hose up, turn a hydrant on, and I get water to the pumper. Mm-hmm. If I'm not prepared in the rural setting and I don't know how to overcome all the challenges that are that face me, I can look like a real clown pretty quickly. So, that was pretty much the class in a nutshell. It was attended well, and we had a lot of good interaction.
Good deal. It's whenever we talk about drafting, I am in one of those more urban areas that
Sure.
has the hydrants and when we think about it, and we've talked about it on the show before, just how important it is to be training on that constantly. That you can come to your class, but if you don't take what you learn at your class back and drill on it routinely, like you just said, like a guy hooking up to the hydrant, you're going to get water into the truck unless you've done something really, really wrong. But I was thinking about it as I was coming down today, and when we talk about water delivery, most of what we talk about on this podcast when we do it is on the rural side. We talk about
Sure.
a lot of tankers. We talk about a lot of portable tanks, but it really is all the same. It's getting water from point A to point B in as efficiently as possible, and as with the maximum flows through those lines. Although it's tactically a little different, the steps to getting them in there are a little different. It really is when you boil it down, it is all the same. And I think that's what we have to do most of the time to simplify that whole process.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's funny you say that. One of the opening slides in the presentation talks about how, in my opinion, I consider drafting one of the most fundamental skills for any pump operator, right? I don't care if you're in New York City. I don't care if you're, in Bedford County, Tennessee, right? Everybody needs to know how to draft and do it efficiently. And I run into, whether it be in my travels or with my full-time job or, classes that I do, the attitude tends to be from some more urban firefighters. Well, I'm not going to need to draft. I haven't needed to draft in my however many years of service so far. But at least in the state that I live in Tennessee, I'm seeing more and more of these fire departments that have never needed to draft before drafting on a routine basis because of various incidents that have occurred. We talked about it in the class, the Hurricane Helene that came through and wiped out a lot of East Tennessee and part of West North Carolina, right? A lot of the fire departments on the Tennessee side, they were faced with massive flooding that took out their municipal water systems. For some communities, it was a couple days. Others, it was upwards of a month. So we had cities, county seats in our state where we had departments that routinely operated off of hydrants. Now they have no hydrants for municipal water. Mm-hmm. Now they're trying to figure out, well, what the heck are we going to do in these instances? And Greenville, Tennessee was a great example. They went around the city and they started damming up creeks and making watering holes throughout the city. So that way they knew, hey, if something pops off, I know we can get water from here, here, and here. They essentially made their new hydrants out of natural bodies of water. And fortunately, their leadership and their fire department has been very proactive on the drafting side of things in the last couple of years, and their members were prepared. Mm-hmm. But, the other thing, too, is a lot of people don't think about it. It's not just for these fire incidents. A good friend of mine out in West Tennessee, the city of Jackson, Tennessee, they just got hit with really bad storms about a week ago and really bad flooding and this, that, and the other. And there was a neighborhood in the city of Jackson where the floodwaters were starting to rise enough to where it was going to flood all these homes in a subdivision. So Public Works was out there with some portable pumps, but it wasn't making any difference. So Scotty brought out one of the fire department pumpers and marked it out of service, a reserve rig, and he set it up in a cul-de-sac, started drafting, did a twin tube draft, and moved thousands and thousands of gallons and prevented any flooding from that subdivision. So it's those routine out of the box calls that could happen in any community where this most basic fundamental skill could be implemented.
As you were talking about that, I was thinking about, there's almost two parts of it. First is, I haven't drafted since I took Pump Ops 1 and got my qualifications. This isn't going to be good. I hope I remember how to do all this. But then also there are components on the truck that if you don't exercise them regularly, to ensure that when you need to draft, you'll be able to, it becomes a PM issue as
Absolutely.
Well. So there's the skills of the engineer, but then there's also the truck itself and making sure that that's always up and running.
Well, and that's why, some people in my classes, when we teach them in the field, they ask me, why do you focus so much on these alternative drafting techniques that don't require the use of a primer like that? And that is a big part of the skills portion of the classes that I teach. And I tell them, it's not that I don't like primers. Primers have to be on every rig. I want them on my rig, and I don't blame anybody for speccing multiple primers on their rig. However, I also am a realist, and I know that things like primers don't necessarily get exercised like they should. The fire departments that I've worked with and run on, I've driven companies that were in service that the primer was out of service. And hey, well, you know what? We'll get it the next PM or whatever. You can keep running the rig because it still will pump. It still will do everything. It's just going to be a little bit more challenging if I have to draft. So having a backup plan and making sure that you understand and are proficient with alternative ways is really, really important.
One of the topics that came up this week was we were talking about pumps and the importance of getting them right from the start and designing them for water flow. We were talking about in fact, there are some companies or fire departments or fire companies that will they'll just pick a gallons per minute that they want, and whatever ends up. There are other ones that spend a great deal of time and attention to designing that pump system between, the discharges, the intakes, and the pump itself to maximize the water flow. So I just was wondering about, in talking about what we were, exercising everything, and but there's also the design aspect that comes into this. That if you've got a pump with a million bends inside because you wanted to squeeze it into this little space, even if your primer's been exercised and you're getting water into the truck, you're still not going to get, what you expect out of it necessarily, or need out of it necessarily at a call.
Absolutely. And a lot of people put, in my opinion, they put too much stock in, well, I have a 2,000 gallon per minute pump, so whatever, it can do that. That is a really broad statement, right? If we really look at that and look at the NFPA 1900 standard, right, what that statement really should say is, I have a 2,000 gallon per minute pump that is capable of performing that at 150 PSI net pump discharge pressure at a draft with no more than 2 intakes in the water, no more than 20 foot of hard sleeve that is 6 inches in diameter on each intake, and no more than 6 foot of lift, right? Mm-hmm. But nobody's saying that because that's a mouthful to remember and even say. So that is, and we talk about it in the class, but it is a very laboratory specific number. Pretty much everything else that goes on in the rural fire environment is going to be outside of those pump test standards, mm-hmm. right? I'm typically going to have more than 6 foot of lift. I'm going to have more than 20 foot of sleeve, potentially, depending on where I'm drafting from. I may not be able to use 2 intakes right off the bat to get that flow. So it's important to understand, like, when people are operating their rigs and they do not meet that number, why aren't they meeting that number? Is it discharge related? Is it intake related? Is it configuration related? Is it the laws of physics, right? Mm-hmm. One of the slides that we have in our presentation, we have one of our rigs. It's a 1,500 GPM pump that we're drafting with. It's operating off of a bridge that is about 23 feet of lift, right? Mm-hmm. And the students were like, well, it's a 1,500 GPM pump, so I should expect that. That joker could barely do 500 gallons a minute because of the lift. And then when we put a second intake and twin tubed it, it could barely do 900. Really? So gravity is a real pain in the butt, and it's important to understand that. And not to steal a page out of Dennis Laguerre's book, but he has a phrase that I really like, and it resonates with a lot of rigs today. A lot of rigs, in my opinion, and in Dennis's, are over discharged and under intaked, right? We got rigs that have lots and lots and lots of discharges, but they come with only the bare minimum on intakes. Typically, if it's a side mounted pump, right, we got a driver side intake and an officer side intake. And a lot of people don't put any stock into having more than just those 2 bare minimum intakes. We were just teaching a class in Gainesboro, Virginia, and they built a beautiful, it's a wagon is what they call it, and it is a water hauling machine. But they put a big block motor in it. They put a 2,000 gallon per minute pump in it, but they also made sure that, hey, we're going to have enough intakes. We're going to be able to get water from all 4 sides of this rig to be able to move the water. We have the discharges. We have what they did on their rig is they spec'd 3 large diameter discharges. So 2 on the officer side and 1 off the rear. But to supplement that and be able to get that water out of the truck, they made sure it was intaked appropriately to get water into the truck. And during the final scenario that we did with that rig in that class, we were able to flow 2,250 gallons a minute just off that rig alone. And we did what's called a quadruple tube draft. So we used all 4 intakes, a lot of hard sleeve, got into the source, and it was just slinging water.
What about, that was, you could call that a big water hookup.
Oh, absolutely.
But also, I was just thinking about, we ran an article, a 2-part article by Nick Pepper. Yeah. About it was about diagnosing pump problems and stuff. But what made me think of it is I wanted you to describe sort of a big water hookup and what you mean when you say that, because and what made me think of it was one of the pictures he ran in part one was actually yours.
Yeah.
And, he asked me to fix that online and everything. But talk about if we're on the more urban side, the more municipal side. Talk about the big water hookups to a hydrant. What that means at the hydrant, and what that means you have to have at your truck.
Yeah, absolutely. So whether it's a big water hookup, a heavy hookup, or dressing the hydrant, whatever terminology you use, all of those phrases mean the same thing in my mind, and that is using multiple ports off of the fire hydrant coming into the supply engine, and this is where sometimes this gets lost in translation. The key here is if I'm doing a heavy hookup. What's important tactically and strategically from a water supply perspective is to get the most bang for your buck. Incident commanders, water supply officers, engine operators should make sure that they deploy their rig so that they have an attack piece that's fighting the fire, doing their thing, and a supply piece at the water source, at the hydrant. So the rig that's performing the heavy hookup is the supply engine at the hydrant. And the reason we're doing that is by performing a heavy hook, what we're doing is we're splitting the flow between multiple ports, and something really, really special happens when we split water between multiple ports. There's a hydraulic rule and law of physics that says that when I double flow through anything, hose, a nozzle, pipe, fire engine, ladder truck, whatever it is, my friction loss quadruples. Okay. But when I split that flow in half and I have 50% flowing here and 50% flowing here, what ends up happening to the friction loss in the original line is it goes down 75%. So I have a dramatic reduction in friction, which ultimately allows more water to get into the rig. So that's why we're using multiple ports on the hydrant to go into the rig. Now, the next step in talking about what do we need to do this efficiently is we need to make sure we're using large diameter hose. Okay. And I actually did a bunch of testing, and it's in my book. All the data is published by Fire Engineering Books, but there's something that really important that happens. A lot of people think because most of the fire hydrants in America have a 4.5-inch steamer port and two 2.5-inch side ports, regardless of whatever thread you may be using. But a lot of people have the mindset of I can hook large diameter to the steamer port. And since the 2.5-inch ports have 2.5-inch threads, I just hook 2.5 or 3-inch there. What you're doing when you do that is, will it help? Will it give you a little bit of water? Yes, but it's a little bit of water, because water being a fluid, it follows the path of least resistance. So the water is the majority of it is going to want to go out that large diameter hose and not through that 2.5 off the side port. Does it help? Yeah, a little bit. Are you being perfectly efficient? No. So what we teach, what we really like to hit on is make sure if you're doing a heavy hydrant hookup, you use multiple large diameter hose, right? Regardless of the connection that's on the hydrant, use large diameter hose from the outlets to the pumper. And that's how you can actually maximize, get the full hydrant's potential. Because what a lot of folks don't recognize is a fire hydrant is designed to flow its maximum volume under two conditions. The first condition is all the outlets need to be used. That's really important. But the second condition is a residual main pressure of 20 PSI. That's where that rule, don't let your intake drop below 20, that's where that comes from, because the Water Authority doesn't want you to let the pressure in their municipal system drop below 20, because if that happens, you can cause damage to their system potentially, or you can cause a backflow of contaminated water into their system. People get sick and bad things happen. So those are the two conditions that must be met. Now, what's important is, I call it the Bermuda Triangle in hydraulics, right? The fire department really knows their rig. We know the pumper, we know the pump, we know the discharge side of the rig. We're really good at that. The Water Authority, they know the hydrants, they know their mains, they know everything like that. But that connection between pumper and hydrant is where I think a lot of things get lost in this Bermuda Triangle, right? There's a lot of wild theories. Well, you can't do this because this will happen, or you can hook this up if I want to do this. And there's a lot of misinformation on both sides of the house. So the key here is that using large diameter hose and doing a heavy hook, what it does is it opens up that area, which reduces friction, which means if I'm at the max flow capacity at 20 PSI, I can get that volume from hydrant to pumper. Even though it's a really short space, there's still friction in that hose. And I want to minimize that friction. That's what the heavy hook allows me to do.
When it's funny you brought up the part about the water company saying, about backfeeding the system and everything. I had a call 2 months ago. We talked about it a little bit last month before our podcast. Major manufacturing facility, 600,000 square feet. And we knew where to get the water and all that, but we were flowing enough where the water department gave us a call. And we're like, you're getting close.
Yep,
you're getting close. We might need to tell you to scale this back a little bit. But so it's a real thing. It's a very real thing. And
100%. And it's something that I talk about in the book, and it's something that I teach in our classes, but specifically my class at the Tennessee Fire and Codes Academy called Advanced Pump Operations. And one of the scenarios, a lot of these urban fire departments are of the mindset of, well, once I hook to that fire hydrant, I have an endless supply of water. I can do whatever I want. In some communities, that might be the case, but in a lot of places, it's not. And that water is only going to last you so long, depending on your infrastructure. And that's actually something that ISO grades you on, right? Your water, municipal water authority's ability to maintain the needed fire flow for a specific period of time. And what we've seen a lot in the United States is these fire incidents that require large flows, like what you encountered, and you get to that point where you're getting close to tapping everything in your water towers and your system. So as an incident commander or a water supply officer, this is when you need to be thinking, oh no, how do I supplement my water supply operation, right? It's happened in a lot of places where the fire department has to now transition from hydrant municipal water to a tanker shuttle of some sort. And actually, one of my favorite scenarios that we do in our advanced pump program is, we're flowing water off of out of our tank at the drill field, and our system on the drill field is capable of moving. We can flow 5,000 GPM easy with the hydrants that we have. So students will get there, they're flowing big water, everything's good. They think, yeah, I got this, and then all of a sudden, we drain the water tower.
Yep.
And because it's a private system that's owned and maintained by us, it doesn't do any damage. But all their gauges go from showing steady to they're sucking, supply line into the intakes. And now the scenario turns into, okay, you just lost your water. How are you going to figure it out? Right? Figure out how to get a supplemental flow. And it's personally one of my favorite scenarios that we do.
We had that also. I was not on the call, like my fire company was not on the call. It was a little farther out in the county, but I know there's YouTube videos of it somewhere where exactly that happened. The main tank that was supplying the hydrant system got too low, and they had to switch to a tanker operation. Which, I mean, you think about what that entails. You're going to need to really plan for something like that and know when to flip that switch to say, okay, get the tanker task force here, because now, because that takes time to set up.
100%. And I tell, I preach, and this is a little bit of a conservative number. I'd rather be a little bit, conservative on how I'm deploying things than wait till the last second.
Yeah.
Right. So, the bare minimum, according to ISO, to get credit, right? If you have a needed fire flow for your community that is less than 2,500 gallons per minute, the municipal water authority has to be able to provide that for up to at least 2 hours.
Oh, gotcha. Okay.
So in my mind, if I'm an incident commander or a water supply officer and I'm flowing heavy caliber streams, 1,000 gallon per minute plus 2,000 GPMs at my fire scene for an hour continuously, in my mind, I'm saying, okay,
that's the time.
I have an hour before, according to, a lot of rules and governing agencies, until lights are out. So now is the time for me to deploy, because I essentially have an hour's worth of time to get those resources together, depending on where you are, right? What your community is, how that may be able to be done, or it may take an hour to get all those tankers into a rotation. So that hour mark of heavy caliber streams, in my mind, is the time to say, okay, I don't necessarily need to pull the trigger and call for a supplemental water supply plan, but I need to be thinking about it, right? Where am I going to get water if I need to supplement the system?
Are there any common threads of, I would say, challenges? I mean, it could just be like, nope, every place I go, it's something different. But are there, when you're out there in your own business training, are there similar challenges that a lot of the places you go, those departments are facing? Like any kind of common threads?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest challenges, and I like to tell students, is when we come and do classes, we're not coming and telling them, hey, if you're not doing it this way, you're stupid, right? You're doing it wrong or whatever. But for a lot of fire companies, you don't know what you don't know. And it's okay not to know things, right? So a lot of places we go, they're making the best out of what they have been taught and know at that time. So what ends up happening, in my experience, is the biggest common thread and challenge is people don't have the equipment. And they're like, well, I never knew that I needed more than 2 sections of hard sleeve, right? I never thought that I would need multiple different types of strainers. I didn't know how to use my turbo draft or what kind of hose that I'm supposed to use with it, right? So there is, a distinction there, and a lot of people just don't know what they don't know. So I like to tell my students right at the beginning of the classes that I do, listen, I don't sell equipment. I don't want to sell equipment, but I can guarantee you by the end of this class, you're going to have a wish list of toys that you're going to want for your fire department. Because typically everywhere that we go, especially on the drafting side of things, the number one thing that everybody is lacking for the most part is hard sleeve, right? And hard sleeve is the hottest commodity on my rural fire scene. It goes the quickest, and I typically have the least amount of it to do what I'm trying to do. And one of the things that I tell a lot of folks, that can be changed pretty easily. If you're speccing a rural rig, whether it be a tanker tender, whatever you want to call it, or a pumper, right? There's a lot of wasted space in a lot of places to carry extra sections of hard sleeve, right? And having multiple sections of hard sleeve allows you to do a lot of these more advanced tactics, allows you to maintain fire flows that may be required on these larger incidents.
Have you ever, either in any of your training scenarios, or have you ever just, I don't know, for giggles, tried to have you ever put 2 4-way valves on the front of a hydrant and flowed through 2?
I personally have not. I know that's a tactic that some departments teach in communities and have done it. I know it's popular in Maryland. I personally have not done 2 4-way valves in that configuration. What we do in our advanced pump operation school, we actually have on our campus, we installed a double steamer hydrant. So it essentially has 2 4.5-inch outlets on it. And that hydrant, when we hook to it appropriately with 2 pumpers, we're capable of flowing 4,000 gallons a minute off that hydrant alone.
So what's upcoming? What do you have? What do you have in the hopper right now? Any new books? Any new articles you're thinking about? Where are you gonna? What's your next month look like training wise? You pretty packed?
So starting Monday at our fire academy, we have an advanced pump operations class that's starting. That is for anybody that's interested. You can reach out to me. That is available to anybody in the United States who wants to travel to Tennessee. It's a week-long class where we, show you all these advanced water supply tactics and tips. And, it's somewhere where we have our own toys, we have our own water system. Some of my friends call it my compound, right? Because we have the ability to do a lot of cool stuff. So that starts, our first one of 2025 starts on Monday. And then, we got a bunch of classes through my business that we'll be in Delaware later this month, Georgia at the beginning of May, North Carolina in June. So we're going to be all over the place. So a lot of stuff, a couple articles in the hopper, maybe a book. I don't know. That was a lot. The last one was a lot. So
we always have to have part two. I hear, from what I've heard, when you write a book, you always have to have the follow-up ready. Yeah. So you got some work to do. Do you ever have, or do you have sort of a last message that you always give at your classes? Like, okay, you're all wrapping up, and this is the one thing you want people to walk away with when they're done.
Yeah. So that's kind of, I do. Yes. And it's kind of, to me, a two-parter to that. The first is, listen, we've done a lot of advanced stuff here. We've moved a lot of water. I'm not saying you need to do this on every fire. You probably don't. But if you can operate and perform these skills and flow this much water, that bread and butter two hand line fire is going to be simple and easy. You'll be able to do it in your sleep. But more importantly, what I like to stress to students is everything that we teach is perishable, right? Not that all of it is necessarily complex, but it's all perishable. I'm not saying you have to put thousands of foot of hose on the ground and, flow 5,000 gallons a minute, but getting outside and playing with your four-way valve, right? Just making sure you know what connections to make, right? Pre-planning your rural water sources, knowing, hey, what's the easiest way to get my turbo draft to the edge of the water, right? How do I burp draft, right? What's the process for doing a twin tube draft? That is where you make the difference between being a lever puller and a pump operator.
And that, what you were just talking about, again, I'm thinking back to that large fire, that we had, and, it is easy to totally blank out, so what I was wondering was when you say the burp drafting, that procedure and stuff like that, I know that at that fire, I told our chief engineer, I was like, that cheat sheet you put on the door was perfect, for me for that. And it helped me a lot. When you talk about burp drafting, that seems to me to be a very hands-on thing, that it's not like you can list something on a cheat sheet. How do you tell people, if it is 3 a.m. and you're just foggy for whatever reason, how do you keep that? I guess, how do you maintain confidence that you're going to be able to do it when the time comes?
Yeah. So outside of just getting outside and doing it, I'm going to brag on TFT a little bit. The video series that we did with them, myself and Henry Lovett, we did a rural water video series, and their folks there at TFT, who helped us, do that video, they did some really great magic, because they asked us, hey, we want to make checklists for that 3 o'clock in the morning scenario. Can you help us and just give us something that we can write down, and we'll clean it up? And they have done exactly that. And I know of fire departments right now that they keep those cheat sheets, those little synopsises, in their operators compartment. So if they need to look up how to pressurize prime for whatever reason, because they're having a brain fart, they got a rookie operator, step 1, step 2, step 3. Okay. Now, I'm not saying that's how you roll it, but it is a good security blanket in a lot of those instances. But the key here, as cliche as it sounds, is get out and train. You just got to get out and train. And a lot of folks that ask me, hey, how is whatever agency successful in their rural water movement and tanker shuttle operations? How do they do it? And the answer is always they get out and train, right? They do quarterly or semi-annual training evolutions where they get everybody in their tanker task force together and they do a scenario and they run it. That is the best way to be proficient with these skills.
Okay. Want to talk just a couple minutes just about FDIC. Wondering if you got there was a being a water guy.
Yeah.
There was an industrial pumper here that had some pretty impressive setups going on there. I didn't know if you got a chance to see that, and there was also, I think, a new pump control. I was wondering if you got a chance to see either of those things, or if you had a favorite thing, not a favorite thing, but just something that might have caught your eye a little bit at the show this year, just in terms of just something. I didn't think of that.
Yeah, so I saw the industrial pumper that you're talking about, big body pump, 8,000 gallon per minute monitor, looked great. And I was saying to myself, man, I got to figure out how to win the lottery so I can get one of those for my classes, because that would really step my game up. But something that that I really was drawn to, I went over to the Puck Fire booth. They had that big hose reel and everything like that. And something that they were talking to me about is they have a unit that is designed. It's primarily currently for industrial applications. It's a boom truck it's a boom on a trailer that has a pump that they can extend and put into a water source. And the unit that they currently have is capable of doing like 4,500 gallons a minute at around 100 PSI, but don't quote me on that specific pressure. So it's able to move large volumes at a reasonable pressure. And something that I think that they're looking into, and I'm excited to see after talking to them, is having a more scaled down unit version of that for rural applications, right? Having a trailer mounted unit that has a boom for access issues that I can get into the water and run my fill site. So now I can free up manpower, but I can also free up an engine company on my rural scenes. So that got me really excited. I'm excited to see where that goes and what happens with that.
Sweet. Whew. Well, it's been a week, huh?
It has been a week. It has been a week.
Andy is also on our advisory board, so he had a meeting with us this week, and we are planning for the fire apparatus and emergency equipment brand. We're looking at the second half of the year here and getting everything squared away there. No doubt there will be some things that we've seen at the show here that will make their way into the into future issues there and into future podcasts here. But just a teaser for a podcast we have planned with Bill is we're going to be covering soon, talking about designing pumpers or tankers or pumper tankers for maximum flow. And I think that kind of ties in with some of the things that even at this podcast this week, like I was saying, we were talking about pumps and how much you really need to plan them. Plan that pumping system. I consider it a system, not just
100%.
a pump. It's the number of discharges, the number of intakes, and how you plumb them, for maximum water. And I'm sure there are trade-offs everywhere. In order to do something, you might need to make the truck a little longer to get that long stretch of straight pipe, to do that. But, that's just something we're going to be putting our heads together to come up with for a future episode of our water delivery. Probably I would say it's probably coming in the next couple of months. So a teaser there, but are there ever departments that you go to when you're training where they have a new rig? You talked about that one rig earlier, where they have that new rig. They're very proud of that new rig, and then you get there and you're just like, I don't know how this is going to work. I don't know how we're going to achieve what they want to achieve with this.
Well, yes, that does happen. Or something that one of my mentors really instilled in me is this idea of test but verify, right? And a lot of times I go places where people are so proud of their new piece, and they'll throw out numbers like, yeah, we got 4,500 gallons a minute out of this pumper, and I'm like, you did, huh? Right? I understand you may have, in my mind, I'm saying, yeah, I understand you may have had 10 nozzles, but if they were all flowing 100 gallons a minute a piece, that's not 4,500 gallons a minute, right? So one of the things that we make sure that we do in every class, if folks have a new rig and they want to see what it's capable of, we're all about it. We're going to show you how to maximize it. We'll show you how to rock and roll with that thing. However, we are going to verify it, right?
Okay.
We're going to verify it. We have our pitot gauges. We have flow meters, and we will explain, hey, this is why we're doing this. This is why this is hooked up here. And the numbers we get, that is an accurate description, right? We're not guesstimating our numbers.
I wonder if that really, I mean, I have to guess that there are some companies and some departments out there that when you bring a flow meter, an inline flow meter, to show them exactly what's going on, it must just blow their minds sometimes.
It does, and it does. But the other thing, and again, I don't want to get into trying to bash, smooth bore versus fog nozzle, but a lot of times what we see when these numbers get a little goofy, one of the culprits is the organization is using an automatic fog nozzle on their master streams. Yeah, that stream looks awesome, but you don't know what is flowing, and if your flow meter's not calibrated. So when we do a lot of our classes, you will see that we use a lot of smooth bores. It's one, because that is effective for large-scale fires and penetration, this, that, and the other. But it's really because we want to be able to take our pitot and say, hey, there is 80 pounds at that tip. It's a 2-inch tip. That's every bit of 1,000 gallons a minute. You can take it to the bank, right? So
do you end up sometimes, you said a minute ago, like, okay, they got the new rig, they want to see what it can do, and you'll show them. But like, do you go into it cold and just go, okay, let's get started, or do you kind of get there a day early and scope it out a little bit, the rig and
this
stuff
is
like
probably
that?
This is a little bit of a peek behind the curtain. So I used to do exactly that. Get there early and make sure and have all these drawn up plans, and this is how we're going to do it, and this and we're going to need this. And I'll tell you what, it ended up being more of a headache, and more things went wrong when I overplanned it.
Okay.
Right? Because I'm trying to, in my head, it has to be this way and has to do this. So really what I do now is I come up with the plan. So if it's a 2-day class, they show me the rig that we're going to use. I get a feel for it on day one. And then usually that evening, I will draw up a little plan of how I want things laid out. But in my head, I'm like, Andy, make sure this is a loose version, right? Be flexible, because you know that this intake valve tomorrow is probably not going to work, or you're going to have holes in your suction hose overnight, or whatever it may be. So yeah, I try my best to be flexible, but I do come up with a minor plan.
I was chuckling a little bit just because of what you were saying, but then my son goes to the U.S. Naval Academy, and one of the things he learned very early, when he's a first year guy, so he's a plebe, he's still the bottom of the, he's scum of the earth right now. There, he's got next month he gets out of that. But one of the things that he learned very early on, I'm guessing this is a well-known term. It was new to me and new to him, but he said everything there is semper gumby. Be always flexible, always flexible. So, so it's the truth. I mean, the military, man, they change stuff on a dime.
Yep.
Even if it's like college right now for them, they still change stuff on a dime. So, but yeah, semper gumby, always flexible.
I like it.
And that, but I mean, and one of the reasons I was asking was because, I mean, you never know what you're going to exactly. And you're going to have to think on the fly a lot of times. You're really going to have to, at that moment in time, pick what you're going to do. Your class is the time to be learning how to do that proficiently.
Sure.
But it also makes sense for you to be like, I don't know what we're going to get.
Hey, and
I'm not going to break anything, but
we're going to figure it out as a group, right? And that's one of the things that I love the most about teaching my advanced drafting class in the field and stuff like that is, hey, listen, and I tell the agencies that are sponsoring us, listen, this is what I need. I need a body of water, okay? It needs to be within 100 foot of where I can safely park the truck, and I need to have somewhere where I can flow water, right? And some people are like, well, you don't need a boat ramp, you don't need a dump tank right next to the rig. I tell them, no, I want the challenge. We want the challenge because more of the aha and the learning for the student occurs. But selfishly for me, it's a challenge for myself, right? Where we were in Gainesboro a couple weeks ago, right? We had that exact scenario. We had about 60 foot of distance that were separating us and about 15 foot of lift. We did a triple tube draft, and it was, all right, guys, this is what you have. This is the closest water. You have, we'll give you the equipment. You have the equipment, so you can take that off your plate, figure it out, make it happen, get me water, right? And a lot of problem solving occurs, and a lot of learning occurs because of that.
How do you manage at a class like that? You know, I don't know how big those classes get, but I got to think it's probably 10 to 15 people, you know.
Yeah.
And, you know,
minimum.
You can spread people out. You know, you got these guys, you know, running the hard sleeve and, you know, all that kind of stuff. But then when it comes to pumping, how do you manage instructing at the pump panel, potentially with the pump screaming and, you know, there's only one guy operating the pump?
Yeah, so that is where it becomes tough. So when we do our advanced drafting class, what we try and do is the first day we do the lecture, all that good stuff. But in the afternoon, we make sure that every student has the ability to operate the pump, do a burp draft, do a pressurized prime, and perform a twin tube draft. So there's a dump tank. It's a rather simple setup. We're in a parking lot. Okay, everybody knows how to do this, and you can at least say that you've performed the skill, you feel comfortable with the skill, and you can do it. On day two is challenge day, right? Give me your wild water sources. Give me the problems. I want to go into rural America and I want to get water, right? I don't want to do it in a parking lot. I want to do it in the real world. So when we're doing that, I tell all the students, listen, today, not everybody's going to get to pump. So if you want to pump, it's up to you to get to the pump panel, right? These are larger group exercises to show what we can accomplish when we implement these scenarios. All that Joe is doing at the pump, it's no different than what you did yesterday out of the dump tank. So don't feel bad like you're doing a scenario that, or he's doing a scenario that you didn't get to. It's just he's getting an extra rep in a different place. And yeah, it ends up, there's a lot of light bulbs that go off.
Well, we're getting up to the end of our hour here. Do you want to give the book a quick plug?
Yeah, absolutely. So, book that got released by Fire Engineering Books last year at FDIC, Water Thievery: The Art of Water Supply Operations. It has everything regarding these drafting operations that we talked about, a lot of stuff on hydrant operations and large scale water supply operations as a whole. So if you're a nerd and you need some data, a lot of testing, a lot of information, this is the book for you. If you want to, be proficient with water supply operations and get greedy with your water. So,
all right, cool deal. Well, Andy, thanks much for everything this week. Not only the teaching, sitting down with me now, coming to the advisory board meeting. You've had a pretty busy week here.
It has.
It's
a
little
great
different
week.
Dynamic than some other attendees get. So thank you very much for everything you've done.
Absolutely. Thank you.
That. Like I said, we're going to be teased a little while ago. We're going to be talking about designing rigs for water supply. So definitely keep an eye out for that. That'll be coming down the pike. Also want to thank Firehouse Subs all week. They have sponsored this podcast studio, and they also did a lot of the not a lot of they did the lunches for the hands-on training. So we thank them for that as well. So again, from FDIC International 2025, this is Chris McLoone. Have a good one and stay safe, everybody. Thanks again, Andy.
Thank you.